Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I'm Connor. That's Phil.
Yo.
It's the end of something, Phil. Do you ever feel like you came in at the end of something?
Sometimes.
You know, things were good, and you get in there and you're like, I could just tell there's no future in this. Everything's going down. It's the bleak midwinter of the soul. You ever have that feeling?
Mm-hmm. Every day.
Last weekend, we witnessed the final Fight Night card. I would love to say the final Apex card. God, would I love to say that, but I'm afraid that is impossible. I must simply say the final card of the ESPN era of the UFC. It's over. The long nightmare is over. And a whole new nightmare is about to begin. But for the time being, I'm feeling genuinely optimistic. You know, I don't know exactly what the experience is like for you over there, Phil. But over here, we are going from a service where we're expected to pay, like, I don't know what it is now, like it might be like $13 a month or some shit, to have ESPN Plus in order to be able to then buy the pay-per-views, which are like $80 now.
Mm-hmm.
People have done the math, I'm sure. But if you were to be the wonderful, honorable UFC fan that the organization wants you to be, I think you probably would spend somewhere in the neighborhood of minimum like $1,200 to watch an entire year of UFC events.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's going to be over. Again, I have no idea what impact this has for you, Phil. You seem to have, I mean, this goes to show, and we will be talking about the ESPN era in more detail and sort of putting it in its grave later in the show. But I just want to say before we get into this Royval Cop card, it goes to show, because you have not been paying for ESPN Plus.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a thing in the UK. Even you have a sense of resentment for what we are calling the ESPN era.
I gotta say, from my perspective, it's not even resentment. Like, my main feeling around it is simply nothingness. I have no sense of like feel about what the ESPN era was. It just like vanishes through the fingers when you try and grasp at what the ESPN era was or felt like. I mean, I can certainly remember that there was a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of things that happened, but I don't know, like the Fox era, for sure. I can remember this, both in terms of it having a sort of punctuated experience with the Fox, with, the big Fox cards and the small ones. And, I can remember that first card that they, UFC on Fox 1 with the big disastrous JDS Kane fight and all that other kind of stuff. But I can remember a sense of, it has a sense of personality associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember the Spike era. Mm-hmm. And again, there's a sort of, bro-y, affliction-y vibe that comes along with the Spike era and the new metal and the gladiators and, the way the Ultimate Fighter, always really seemed like part of the Spike era. The ESPN era is like really notable that I just have no sense of it at all. I know it was there. Mm-hmm. I know it was massive. And, and there was so much, oh my God, there was so much MMA.
Yep.
But it's just, it just has left so little impact in terms of a memorable promotional era.
Yeah.
Like it is the avatar of fight promotion. I know it was there. I know it made a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
I can vaguely remember moments of, being irritated. The Apex is a notable low point, ironically, but yeah, I just have no. I mean, and I don't think this is just me, right? There's no one.
No.
No one is out there on Twitter talking about this. No one has said anything. I mean, I guess this will spin up a bit more once we get into the whole Paramount deal, which, again, we haven't talked about this much, but again, seems incredibly weird that a whole bunch of, fairly rich people seems to have banded together to essentially create a modern supermassive media conglomeration out of the shell of Paramount by simply bolting on things that are much bigger than Paramount onto it via massive expenditure of cash. And the UFC is simply one of the, it's simply, as it often is, the beneficiary of people being around with huge amounts of cash to spend because they're desperate.
Yes, the swollen, acne-ridden teenage hog still suckling at the teat.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is, it's an extremely weird situation that I'm honestly more curious to find out more about from, multiple different angles. But yeah, I think it's just the fact that, you don't see anyone talking about, what were your favorite moments of the ESPN era? You know, what do you think it's going to be like on Paramount? It just died with a whimper. It just slid off the screens.
I think they all kind of tend to die with a bit of a whimper. Like you were saying, the Fox era. I also remember I remember how it started. I remember some key Fox cards. I think in my mind, it's also kind of combined with it's also an era where a bunch of Strike Force guys were making splashes in the UFC. So that helps define it. But it also kind of just the final Fox televised Fox cards were okay, nobody cares anymore. This is kind of dead. These eras do tend to end kind of, like a bladder with all the air squeezed out, but like a whoopee cushion, if you will.
Yeah,
but the ESPN era was sort of
people aren't going to be putting massive promotional material up behind something which they're not going to own anymore.
Right.
But yeah, it's more just the fact that the ESPN era has no sense of what it was like to it.
Yeah.
Not really. Other than, most of my feelings about it are negative, but even then I can't rustle up any strong ones. They were just you managed to throw an absolute shit ton of fighters at me.
Yeah.
That's basically what I remember.
Yeah.
This is the era that turned, because as someone who, used to follow everything, that this is the era that simply made that impossible.
Yeah.
This is the era that anonymized UFC fighters for me.
Yes. So we'll get more into that discussion a little later in the show. Obviously, we have some feelings to express and some memories to try to recapture, I guess. It's all a blur, really. But we have to kick things off here on our final fight card recap episode of 2025, recapping some of the highlights of a fight card. As I said, we had the year's final Apex card. And we looked at it ahead of time and said, you know what? As far as Apex cards go, I don't know if this is the Apex, but it's not the nadir.
Mm-hmm.
We had Manel Kape versus Brandon Royval in the main event. We had Zane had a problem with this booking, but I actually quite liked it, and I think time has proven me correct. We had promising up-and-comer Kevin Vallejos versus Giga Chikadze in the co-main. Melchizedek Costa, Morgan Charrier, cool featherweight matchup. I will say this too, looking forward into the first few half-booked events of 2026, I do wonder if the UFC may have finally understood that people like smaller fighters, that they produce better fights. Because it looks like our first several events are all main evented by bantamweights, lightweights, and featherweights. Which is sick. And that was the other notable thing about this card, which definitely helped it from feeling like shit by Apex standards. And last week's card, we got lots of flyweights and bantamweights and lightweights, and shit is exciting and cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, hopefully that's due to a few things. You would hope that it's that as Dana gets, visibly less engaged with wanting to be part of promoting his own product, that some of his long-standing biases are also being
we can
cleaned
say
out.
fetishes.
Yeah. And also that they perhaps have a broader corporate strategy on a less good note. They perhaps have a broader corporate strategy. They're maybe we shouldn't be pushing our big divisions quite so much because they're all totally fucked.
Yeah.
But and yeah, these are the only ones that we can actually rely on to have people show up and fight in. But yeah. I can't see that as anything but a good thing. Whatever the reasons behind it.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
I will take it.
Yep. Maybe Anthony Smith retiring has simply signified a greater change than we knew at the time.
It was a watershed moment for the sport, Anthony Smith's retirement. We all laughed at the time, but it turns out they were right to commemorate him with that Jelly Roll video. Because it really was.
I mean, he was a hero. He took that booking with him to the grave of his career. He took that booking style. Nowadays, they look at the light heavyweights and they're like, what light heavyweight do we have that's as thrilling as Anthony Smith?
Yeah.
And there's just no one.
Nothing. How could there be?
I guess we'll book some bantamweights then.
And speaking of little fighters, we did have Manel Kape and Brandon Royval in the main event. How did we predict this one to Phil? I can't quite remember.
I don't know either. I cannot remember for the life of me.
I actually have something to tie this and the co-main event together. Both fights feature a fighter trying to operate on the outside, getting obliterated after running into the fence and trying to skirt along it in the same direction. So both of these fights were ultimately defined by a thing which has increasingly come to define what continues to be wrong with MMA striking for me, which is bad footwork. Now, what about Kape Royval specifically? I mean, what stood out to you here? It was short. There's not a lot. Certainly wasn't a lot from Manel Kape, but wasn't necessary for him to do a lot. It was the beginning of what was meant to be a 5-round fight, and I think one of his first, really committed attacks was the shot that knocked Brandon Royval out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, basically, it is just that capital T technical Brandon Royval is incapable of defining a direction of the fight apart from backwards, right?
Yeah.
That's so the story of this fight is essentially that of a spiral, where he's just, they start in the center, and he's pushing, and he's throwing some stuff at the Kape. As as we both said, he's probably steadily, slightly outpointing him.
Oh yeah.
And then he gets pushed behind the black line, and then he's mostly kind of stays there for the rest of the fight, or close to it. Like, Kape is not, is not being greedy with how much he's pushing Royval back. He doesn't really need to be.
Yeah.
So
he just applies a pretty methodical pressure.
Yep. He doesn't need to be, cutting Royval off particularly. He doesn't need to be, staying on him in any particular way because, Royval is just steadily spiraling backwards against the cage, and then he hits it, and then he gets smoked. So that's pretty much that's what I really saw from it. I mean, I think the main thing is that, Royval obviously massively out of position, getting hit by a humongous puncher, but even then, I would not have expected Brandon Royval would be essentially one punch KO'd by Manel Kape.
Yeah, that was the big surprise. The guy who we've seen him hurt plenty of times before, but is generally regarded as fantastically durable. I think
it was a good performance by Kape. I will
definitely
say that.
I mean, I don't even know if I look at it and say like, oh, Brandon Royval must be declined or something. I think he just got hurt. He got hit with a picture perfect punch, which had many things behind it to surprise him. Cause, first of all, Kape was like annoying him at range by consistently catching his kicks. Not that he was able to do a whole lot with them, but anytime that Royval threw that left leg, it was getting caught. And then like a time or two before the knockout punch, he does that and like he hits him to the body. And I think this encourages Royval to give up more and more ground and get pushed behind that black line more and more often because clearly the long range weapons with which he thought he was going to be doing lots of work in this fight were already getting, if not routinely punished, then, anticipated and became annoying to him. And then, he gets driven back. He does the thing that every MMA fighter does, which is he thinks he's pivoting or taking an angle, but he's just kind of drifting off to his left. Taking himself away from the opponent while removing all the threats from his own position. And Kape like follows through into southpaw and hits him with a very short, very fast right hook on the chin. I think the stance switch, the direction he's moving, the fact that it's the first time in the entire fight that Kape has like chased him out of the pocket. All of these contributed to him just not seeing that punch at all. He did wake back up and was relatively steady on his feet for a man who was just completely unconscious. He basically got woken up by like the third punch Kape hit him with. So, maybe that recoverability was still on display, but it was not enough to stop the fight from ending.
Yeah. What else? Royval could not either, due to Kape's positioning and hand fighting, he couldn't make his jab work at all. Like normally he is like flicking it out there a whole bunch.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how he's covering his entries. He really wasn't doing that this time.
He jabbed quite effectively against Joshua Van. That's a good point.
And Brandon Royval. Moreno. But yeah, I feel like he was something about how Kape was poised that just meant that he felt like he was going to get countered. But yeah, normally he's he's doing this sort of, flicking meaningless jab to cover his entries kind of thing, which isn't a big counter risk, nor is it much of a risk to get hit by. But, this time he was just kind of throwing his kicks from range without like much to mask them, sort of Jackson Wink style.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's yeah, hard to say what that's down to, but I think it's just because he felt like he couldn't do it against someone who was looking so keyed up to counter him.
I guess. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, good performance from Kape.
And he's also, it wasn't necessarily a stance thing either, because he's been completely happy. He's been completely happy to jab into, close stance hand fights.
Yeah.
In the past.
I think he did it plenty to Joshua Van again.
Mm-hmm.
Joshua Van, orthodox, and I think he gave him lots of southpaw jabs.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's about it. I mean, very short.
I mean, it was a good performance by Kape.
Definitely,
as we said, might not have been, pushing a pace in terms of strikes thrown, but he was steadily outmaneuvering Royval into a position where he could, if he hadn't knocked him out, he would have at least, hurt him and clearly won the round.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's 3 minutes. I mean, if it wasn't Manel Kape, I don't think there would be any cause to mention the pace at all. Mm-hmm. It's just the fact that knowing him, you're like, well, maybe it would have been like that for the rest of the fight if he hadn't found that shot.
Yeah.
But if this was any other fighter, I'd be like, yeah, that was a very reasonable feeling out phase before you seized the opening and ended the fight. So yeah.
Yep.
How about the co-main event? Another, this one at least had a bit of a story to it. Kevin Vallejos, Giga Chikadze. As I said, Zane did not like this matchup because he thought, why are you giving promising young Kevin Vallejos Giga Chikadze at this point? I kind of thought...
Giga Chikadze was a plus 300 dog?
Yeah, that was wild. I thought...
What?
I mean, I agreed with Zane that this was stylistically a big challenge for Vallejos. Mm-hmm. And I think the fight bore that out.
Yeah.
But I was okay with the matchup because I'm like, well, Giga's old. Vallejos might be able to make something anyway. And, I'm frequently on the why is the UFC rushing this person, but I'm certainly not anti giving prospects tough fights in the early stages of their careers. I like to see that. I like to see good prospects fighting each other. I like to see a good prospect fighting a tough veteran. Just as long as it doesn't become like a Steve Erceg situation where now you're just, once you're in, you never get out.
Yeah, you can't step them back.
Right. And so, at this point in Chikadze's career, I was okay with the matchup. Zane's caution was, as I said, absolutely warranted because Vallejos does not have a style which is really meant to work with a style like Giga Chikadze's. He's very planted over his feet. He likes to keep a high guard and operate in the pocket. And this is a problem a lot of MMA fighters have, but he's a pocket fighter who doesn't really have reliable ways of getting to that range. He is sort of circumstance has shaped him into something of an aggressive counterpuncher. I don't know if that's actually you could call that his core style. It's just that he has one range where he's really good, and the way that it happens is opponents try to attack him. And so he has not needed to develop a good jab or good footwork or so on and so forth. And what that led to was a fight where, he was really struggling to track Chikadze down and was eating lots of kicks. And, but anytime they did clash, it was okay, Kevin Vallejos hits really hard and Giga Chikadze looks like a man made of semi-hydrated pasta.
Mm-hmm.
He just cannot stand these collisions. But then it ended in almost exactly the same, a much wilder series of techniques from Vallejos, but positionally, identical to where Brandon Royval got stopped by Manel Kape.
Yeah. I think towards the end of round one, Vallejos clipped him with a spinning back fist out of the clinch.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's just the Chikadze, as many tall fighters do, enjoying skirting his way around the cage with his chin straight up in the air.
Which is bad. Should we say that?
Yeah.
You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't skirt the cage. Yeah. I mean, if I can recall the specifics, it's Chikadze in a southpaw stance, circling off to the weak side, as MMA fighters love to do. And he runs into the fence, and then he just, like, it's so clear he doesn't know how to pivot in that direction. I'm not mocking the man. I mean this literally. Like, it's so clear watching his feet that he has not been taught how to pivot to the open side of his stance. Which, fair enough, is like, it's actually a difficult movement. It's a difficult thing to like get in your muscle memory and to make your body coordinate. You have to like, say your right foot's in the back. You have to like turn your right foot inward as if like you would if you're throwing your right hand while stepping off to the side. And you have to like let your lead foot pivot last. Like doing a lead foot pivot to the right from an orthodox stance is just an awkward sequence of movements. Which is why everybody automatically, except for MMA fighters, circles to the left. But in this precise moment, Chikadze is like, he just kind of like steps with like a square back foot out of his stance, just trying to skirt along the fence. And I'm not going to say that's entirely why the shot that hits him obliterates him or anything, but like, it's just the longest, most awkward way possible, giving the biggest window of opportunity to go in that direction that you can.
Yeah.
Angular movements have to be tight. And, even if he'd hit a perfect pivot, he might have just gotten blindsided by that back fist, which I gotta say, like, is usually a dumb gimmick move, but I think there are lots of moments in boxing exchanges where a spinning back fist is really clever, and I think this was a good one from Vallejos.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think that's one of the primary utilities of spinning attacks is catching people moving along the cage.
Yeah,
because they're like, they see that your left side is loaded, or they're just an MMA fighter and they're going left. Yeah. You spin and hit them with something from the other side. Like,
they think they've gotten off the line.
Like Max Holloway's spinning back kick is like was back in the day like a very defined like anti-space control, anti-space technique that would be used when people were trying to move away from his. I think he generally threw it with his left foot. So yeah, when people were like MMA fighters do, circling along the cage to their left.
McGregor too used to be pretty good at those.
Yeah,
and use them exactly the same way. So yeah, this one, Vallejos comes in, throws the right hand, and he can see that Chikadze is already kind of lazily loping to the outside of that punch. So it's in that moment, as he's missing, is like, why wouldn't I throw? Don't I wish I had another right hook to throw on that side of the position? Spinning back fist. Yeah. Yep. Up to that point, a fight where I think Vallejos really was struggling for most of it. Even if
Rockhold Belfort, something similar. I don't know if they were right next to the cage, but it was.
Yeah.
Definitely. But yeah, that's one of the ways that you should use spinning techniques in MMA.
Absolutely.
And the opponents by the cage.
So yeah, any other things you just want to mention before we get into our big ESPN era recap discussion?
Disgusting KO. Like,
in this one?
Like, yeah.
Oh my God.
Truly horrific.
I mean,
It's
yeah.
to be said, like, as not the biggest Giga Chikadze fan, even I was just like,
I mean, it wasn't just the spinning back
the
fist
knockout
was
itself. It was the flopping on the floor afterwards,
the
like
follow-up,
a sort of dying fish.
The man fell like fucking Peter Griffin, like one arm pinned and like flapped across his back, like it just got immediately like half Nelsoned and smashed with 4 elbows by Vallejos. I mean, it's really horrible. It is a savage finish. I don't know why I'm laughing. It's because I'm uncomfortable.
Yep.
It's gross.
No, it's a grim one.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise, Melchizedek Acosta knocked out Morgan Charrier almost immediately with a head kick. It's not much to say about that.
Yeah. Made me sad. But, he is at least a fun fighter, and it will be fun to see more from him. But I'm glad to see Morgan Charrier go out like that.
Yeah.
He's better. He's better than that.
And Yaroslav Amosov made his long-awaited UFC debut and obliterated Neil Magny with, I gotta say, a really sexy anaconda choke. Setup and finish was pretty cool. This is kind of a thing of Amosov's, but the way that he captured Magny's elbow with his legs, after setting up the anaconda from getting like a guillotine position from half guard, I think. And then just like slid up Magny's body until he was completely like sitting on top of his head, wrapping up his arms with his legs to choke him out. Pretty cool. He's not always that exciting a fighter, Yaroslav Amosov. But that is what an actual like contender is supposed to do to Neil Magny.
Yep.
If you're really good, then you will beat Neil Magny absolutely anywhere.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean that's mostly what I have to say about the card.
Bobby Green.
Yeah.
Basically tricking Lance Gibson, Anderson Silva style was good fun.
Yeah. Don't know how much more I really want to see Bobby Green.
No, very true. I was like, this is the problem, is that he's definitely at that point in his career when any wins will simply get him put into people they need to get over on him.
Right.
He'll just, if he racks up any kind of momentum, they'll just be like, well, it's time to use him to get whoever our next like Arman Sarukian type person up into contention from.
Yeah.
And still fun to see him win.
Yeah. Always good. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we will be interring the UFC on ESPN era, hopefully for good.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
All right. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We've gotten the fights out of the way. It's time to just wrap up the year. I think of this as a pre-Handies sort of retrospective event, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Handies, we're going to look back and we're going to celebrate, all that there is to celebrate, even the stuff that is not worth celebrating at all. We're going to find a way to make it funny and compelling and pick up all these little storylines and trends and so on and so forth. But today, we are bidding a pretty gleeful adieu to the UFC on ESPN. Phil, you mentioned before we started, in fact, I think you made the comparison to Avatar, which, by the way, they're coming out with the third one, I think, this month or something.
Yeah, I think it's the third one. Oh, I was going to say, like, is it the third one? I think it's the third one.
I think it is. There was the first one, which was like 25 years ago, and then the second one came out like last year, and now they're just cranking them out, I guess. So the third one, which is about fire or something. But the reason you made that comparison, right, is that these are somewhat famously movies where when they come out, I think the second one also did fucking gangbusters.
Yeah, it's like one of the biggest cultural events of all time. One of the biggest.
Yeah, right.
One of the biggest box offices of all time, while simultaneously having absolutely zero cultural impact.
Precisely. I mean, speaking of slop, are you familiar with React content on YouTube, Phil?
I am vaguely, yes.
There are hundreds and hundreds of iterations of people reacting to, say, the Lord of the Rings movies. And you can watch people with no experience whatsoever of these movies watch one of them and pick up on all the memes and even things that predate memes. Somebody shows up on screen and they hear the name Gandalf and they're like, I know that. I've heard that. They hear My Precious. They're like, oh, I've heard that. Not to mention all the little memes of, all right, keep your secrets and one does not simply and you shall not pass, etc., etc. All of these moments that even before the movies had just sort of entered the public consciousness. No one knows anything about Avatar. Did not have that kind of impact. And that is exactly how the ESPN era for the UFC feels as well. Like, how long has it been? Like 5, 6 years?
Yeah, it was sometime I'm trying to think when it actually started, right? It was 2019, I believe. When was the first actual card? That was UFC on ESPN. I think was it January 2019? Was it literally on? Literally, did they do it the same thing?
Start of the year.
Yeah. I don't think it was. No, UFC on ESPN for Ngannou versus Velasquez. I think that was February 17th, 2019.
Ngannou versus Velasquez. I don't even fucking remember that.
Yeah.
That happened?
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, means they need to inaugurate each new deal with a Cain Velasquez fight. So they just need to bust him out of jail and have him fight Tom Aspinall. I guess that's why they've been relatively quiet about the first few Paramount events.
Well, now that Cain is old and will be fresh out of several years in prison, it'll even the playing field against one-eyed Tom Aspinall.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. So yeah, like 6 years or whatever, more or less. And just like what defines it? Who are the great champions that came out of, as I said, the Fox deal? Like, I remember that as like the age of like Gilbert Melendez and Josh Barnett. I remember like Hector Lombard having his run. I remember all these Strikeforce guys. Nick Diaz was kicking around. Nate Diaz's prominence began towards the middle end of that era. A lot of big stuff happened, which really stands out in the memory and seems to have made a cultural impact on MMA fans. What is there from the ESPN era that defines it?
I mean, again, that's the thing, is that an era has to be viewed from a promotional perspective. There's obviously, big events that happened during the ESPN era. Potentially one of the biggest, one of the perhaps the biggest and most significant MMA fight of all time happened in the ESPN era, I believe, which is obviously Khabib versus Conor.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's the judgment of a promotion is how well it promoted, and going into ESPN, we were thinking like, lots of people were like, well, Fox isn't really a place for sports. ESPN is a place for sports. This is going to be great for the UFC, A, because it's going to get through to more people, but B, because they are going to treat it like a sport with, more analysis and more, respect for the sport itself, and, better scheduling and all this other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And, and it seems like the main effect of it has been, in fact, that it has been a kind of great anonymizing.
Yeah, it got subsumed into the way that ESPN treats sports,
mm-hmm.
rather than the way that like those sports governing bodies treat those sports. Because
mm-hmm.
those are all sports with like large organizations which determine the rules and organize tournament brackets and, by design, funnel teams towards a decisive like end confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
The UFC does not have such structure. And so it seems like what little sporting identity it had coming into it just got swallowed up by the ESPN side of all those other sports, which is, can we have shit on TV 24 hours a day?
Yeah.
Or on the internet available for streaming at all times. And so it just, that's what defines the era, is content. Boy, they made a lot of content.
Yeah. And it's the era where the band of influence shrank.
Yeah.
Because the UFC has always functioned on a model of, a vast amount of disposable foot soldiers who are, most fighters who will be brutally punished should they try to talk back, or otherwise ask for more money, or basically push back against the machine in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And with, guaranteed payments for UFC for content, their need to prioritize compliance from everyone obviously shot up, and the amount of people they were willing to take back talk from went down, meaning that they acted in several extremely ways. They acted in ways often which you would think are incredibly counterproductive to how a actual promoter should function.
Right.
Not even just in the tactical sense of, in the way that Dana White has always done, where he will shit on his own fighters after they've, had a poor performance. Most famously recently, where he was like, well, I looked like Aspinall wanted out to me. And it's like, what can you possibly benefit by saying that?
Yeah.
What part of your job benefits from you saying this? In what way is this not just wildly unprofessional? But no, even then, that kind of stupidity has always been a core part of the business model, and is potentially even slightly diminished simply because Dana White has become marginally less powerful, but also more notably much less interested.
That's why he pulled out that old chestnut for Aspinall after it did seem like a while before that. You know, we had plenty of hinky results and stuff, but Dana White wasn't out there popping off about how, it's because he was embarrassed because he was actually invested. Because Dana White loves heavyweights, and he was actually paying attention to this one, and he knew he had, two potential stars here, and that's what produces that reaction from Dana. Always is embarrassment. He feels as if he tried to show his friends.
When he gets humiliated in front of his football buddies. Yeah. And the exact, again, going back to the beginning of the Fox era, as he did when Kane fought JDS, and he was like, "What is that idiot doing? What
a disgrace!" He didn't shoot a takedown in the first 40 seconds of the fight. Idiot! I would have shot 10 takedowns.
Just seeing that delicious and, as it turned out, largely imaginary Mexican market, slipping through his fingers.
Yeah.
But no, as I was saying in a very roundabout way, he's always done this. The tactical stuff is not a marker of the ESPN era. Yeah. But getting rid of not just fighters getting close to the end of their prime who talk back, or even, fighters who are prospects, like Kyoji Horiguchi. But the ESPN era was where they let go of all-time great champions because they felt that they were getting too much back talk.
Yeah.
And it is the era where they got rid of Francis Ngannou. It is the era where they got rid of Chris Cyborg.
Yeah.
And I believe it's the era where they got rid of DJ.
Yeah, was that at the very beginning of the ESPN era?
Yeah, Cyborg certainly was.
I feel like it might predate it. I have to fact check. It's like I said, it's difficult to gauge time.
Yeah, I think he was. I think he left.
Yeah.
Just before then.
Last fight, 2018. That's a couple years into the ESPN deal.
No. The ESPN deal was 2019.
2019. Oh, okay.
So he basically lost it, and then they were immediately just like, yeah, don't bother coming back, kind of thing. Or, they didn't go out of their way to keep him there.
Yeah. Wow, so that's...
Similarly, Cyborg left right at the beginning of the ESPN era.
So the UFC trying to get rid of flyweight. This is all aligning in my memory now. They were doing that, and then the ESPN era kicked off, and that's when they backtracked.
Yep.
Because oh shit, we need content. We need bodies. So yeah, I think the running with the content, fighting as content angle, the thing that most defines the ESPN era for me is utter laziness of matchmaking. To the extent that Zane and I on the Vivisection almost every week for the last year or more will have at least one occasion to say, remember Joe Silva? Boy, he was a monster, but at least the trains ran on time.
Yep.
Because there are just so many fights on every card, and this is only accelerated as the era went on. There are so many fights on every card that do not need to be happening. They fulfill no purpose other than to take up airtime on a UFC card. They are frequently two fighters with no potential in a matchup with no bearing on its division, and frequently of very low quality. There's plenty of fighters who don't have a bright future as a championship or whatever, but are still worth watching. But there have been so many matchups with both fighters are simply not good. Why is this in the UFC is a question that just keeps coming up when I am forced to look at the entirety of a UFC card every week. Why is this happening? Who asked for this? I really wish it's almost difficult to discuss because I wish I could come up with some good telling specifics. But how can I? That's the point.
Yeah.
There are fighters.
You are, by definition, going to be describing fights that no one remembers.
Right. They just slide right off your brain because they do nothing. All they do is just create an overall sense of decline.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, just a reasonable way of doing this is that you can just, because it is possible to look at this kind of thing and be like, well, this is simply a function of more UFC events, right? But that's obviously not true.
As many people have. The fewer UFC events, to me, is kind of like the age limits for Congress members.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of people's favorite thing. We need age limits. And it's kind of hard to argue with people who say that. Yeah, these motherfuckers are pretty old. I doubt that would be a bad thing. But I don't think that's really the soul of the issue, actually. It's a symptom of a larger issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's that way with the UFC as well.
Yeah. Is that simply the content factory model means that you have a increasingly large number of fighters that you want to be sure are going to be able to make it to whatever your content obligations are, which is mostly that you need them to be extremely cheap and focused around the Vegas area.
Yeah.
And they're very cheap, and you don't necessarily need, and you want to keep them all on relatively low pay due to not having very many fights. So you simply have nobody's fighting twice a year, if that. Collected in a big group around Vegas that they will simply tag in when they need someone to fill their card up. But yeah, the cards have been what's it called? They've been around the 42. I think that's the ESPN mandated limit. But they've been around that limit basically since
before the ESPN deal.
Yeah, since 2014.
Yeah,
as far as I'm aware.
And 2014 to 2016 is sort of the peak of the modern era of the UFC in terms of popularity and significance of fighters. So there was a time when they were putting out exactly as many events. And yes, people were complaining at the time, oh my God, there's too many UFC events and so on and so forth. But they were still producing memorable cultural moments and scintillating matchups. So the whole 5 kings of lightweight thing. All the great fights produced by Eddie Alvarez and Dustin Poirier and Tony Ferguson and so on and so forth. Those were all in the era when the UFC was putting out 48 events a year or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the quantity. Again, it's not yes, there are too many UFC cards. You can't care about all of them. I agree that is an issue. But I think
there's 200. There's the same number of fight cards with twice the number of fighters,
right?
Thinly pasted over them in an extremely unnourishing.
Right. That's the soul of the issue: is a lack of quality control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they just need a lot of fighters who will be able to step in at short notice for very little money.
Yeah. There's always this rub as a fight fan, right? Where it's you advocate for fighters to get better pay and better treatment, and you're aware that doing that runs somewhat counter to some of the things you want as a fan. If you look at boxing, where fighters are protected by the Ali Act and all kinds of other things, yeah, you frequently wait a very long time to see good fights. And the whole thing, I think in part feels so like spread out and disorganized because of the relative power that fighters have compared to promoters. So it's like, it's not all good from the entertainment perspective. And by advocating for fighters to get pay, you are accepting that, like, you being entertained is not, in fact, the most important thing or the only important thing with this sport.
Mm-hmm.
But it just causes you to look back at Joe Silva, who was just like a fucking little goblin just smashing his toys together. And you're like, fuck, at least the dude was a fight fan. You know, at least he would like see two fighters and be like, they have to fight. There was some passion. There was some love for the sport that was motivating his matchmaking decisions. The ESPN era is the era of either Mick Maynard or Sean Shelby. I can never remember which one is which, saying, I shouldn't be doing this, but just curious, which of these cards do you think have actually been bad? I think these athletes are amazing. That's the ESPN era. It's like a guy who clearly is just like cashing a fucking paycheck and filling out a spreadsheet once a week is like is telling you that you're wrong to complain, that actually the events are of the highest quality and your eyes are lying to you. So,
yeah, I've been briefly looking at like cards in 2014 that people thought were bad.
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
there was
you look back at it and you're just like, really? I mean, some of them, there were obviously times when stuff was truly awful. Around things like the abortive attempts at going to the Chinese market and so on. They had some truly terrible and fighters who would in fact be right at home in the modern UFC. But yeah, something I looked at one of these and it was like Shogun versus Sonnen was bad, and I was like, was it? That can't be right.
Yeah.
Chael Sonnen, Mauricio Hua, Travis Brown, Alistair Overeem, Uriah Faber, Yuri Alcantara, Matt Brown, Mike Pyle, John Howard, Uriah Hall, Michael Johnson, Joe Lozon, Michael McDonald, Brad Pickett, Conor McGregor, Max Holloway, Stephen Seiler, Mike Brown, Diego Brandao, Daniel Pineda, Manel Gambur and Cole Miller, Owen St. Preux, Cody Donovan, James Vick, Ramsey Nijem. I know who each one of those fighters is, and many of them are very good.
That was an astounding experience. That was an incredible experience hearing you go through that whole card. I know all those guys, except I'm not sure I remember Cody Donovan. But other than that,
yeah, maybe.
I know every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
This is always a tough test to do because part of it is we're old and we know these names because they happened in our past. So you can't ever do just like an exact one-to-one comparison like that, just looking back and be like, I know who all these guys are, and then look at the next upcoming Apex card and say the same. But it does still get at something that I believe is true, which is that just nobody's fucking trying to make good fights on at least half the cards these days.
Mm-hmm.
They're literally not trying to make good fights. They are simply trying to have people on the card in the most convenient and cost-effective way possible.
Yes.
So that, to me, is the defining characteristic of the era. Setting aside fucking ESPN Plus, I mean, for example, it was very difficult for me to get a hold of all the fights from this week's card because I don't have ESPN Plus anymore. But even at the time I got rid of it, it was literally not working. I could not get it to function. It was just glitching out. Setting aside all the payment that was required when it was operational, all of the sort of consumer side experiences of dealing with the app or the website, the real defining characteristic is the quality of the fights in that era. And that they were just sort of inexorably going down into a pit of utter mediocrity.
Yep.
So fuck off, ESPN. We will not miss you. And I can't wait to see what new sort of modern horrors are visited upon us by the UFC on Paramount era. But I gotta say, Phil, and call me a fool now, I do feel kind of optimistic about it.
Yeah, I feel like I've got some cautious reason for optimism here. Partially, again, because I feel like the Paramount people are desperate in a way that ESPN weren't. ESPN were like, oh yeah, we need some kind of young sport property to go with the other stuff that we have. And, maybe people will hang around for, once we've got some of those MMA people, and they'll hang around for our other products, all that other kind of stuff. I mean, the Paramount stuff, even though it's, we're once again back to an era where we're not looking at, it's no longer being run by like a sports-focused company. That may work to its benefit rather than its detriment, because it may allow some of the more, some of the elements, the core elements of MMA, aka that is an individual-focused sport and people need personalities to shine. I'm not convinced this will happen. People,
that's not part of the UFC's. They don't like that.
I'm pretty sure that, should the Paramount-focused people talk to the UFC guys will just be like, look, these fighters are like, I mean, the UFC execs are like, they're essentially like the bosses in Animal Farm at this point, and they'll just be like, look, we figured out a way to get these guys to work pretty hard for no money. We have a very profitable business model. Don't mess it up by making them think they're worth anything. But yeah, there's some hope that there will be a little more individuality. But more than that, I think, it's the fact that Paramount seem very, very desperate. The whatever this new weird Oracle Ellison-backed thing is that the new Paramount is becoming, they are desperate for things to work. And thus, I think they will be engaged in making sure that things work. And there are small, again, hopefully the small things around the change are good indicators rather than bad ones. Because around this point in the ESPN era, as mentioned, we were losing DJ, and I think just before the ESPN era started, we were losing DJ.
Right.
I think we lost Rory McDonald around this kind of time as well, if I recall correctly. Like, they were, we lost Chris Cyborg very shortly afterwards. And, it became very apparent that this was going to be quickly apparent that this was going to be the content era. But now I think, most people who have been asked would say that trends recently around bookings and signings have been actually quite positive.
They've started signing people who did not ever touch the Contender Series again. They started signing regional champs. There has definitely been a steady increase in the number of travel cards over the last year rather than Apex events. And we seem to be getting more features for little fighters rather than middleweights and up, which was kind of the rule for, my God, the number of Anthony Smith Apex main events in this 6-year span. Boggles belief.
I think booking trends in the ESPN era were visible even before the ESPN era started. Booking trends visible now are in fact broadly positive. Which, again,
the state
can be a little bit optimistic.
The actual state of matchmaking is still much, much worse than it was even at just before the ESPN era started. But the trend is going in the right direction. We hope. So that's it. Rest and piss. UFC on ESPN. You shall not be missed. And here's to hopefully a brighter future for us to pray.
I've forgotten you already.
Yeah, ESPN. That's why they call it ESPN, Phil. The Ephemeral Sports Programming Network. It sort of does and doesn't exist at the same time.
Yep.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we've got a short little topic from one of our commenters that we're going to hit, and then we'll be out of here after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We had just a couple fights to talk about on this episode and a momentous occasion to commemorate, so a little room left over, which we thought we would use for one of the many topics that have been suggested to us. By the way, if you're listening to this now, please continue suggesting any topics you'd like to hear us discuss on the show, which we will be using in our oncoming Christmas gap. Because what is it again? The first UFC card of 2026 is not until like January 20th or something? 23rd or something like that?
Yeah. Yep.
So we've got quite a long interval here. So please keep your topic suggestions coming. Anything you'd like to hear us discuss on the show, hit us on social media, or the YouTube comments is always great. This one came to us from Matthew Melange on YouTube in the comments of our last episode. And he asked us to give him a storyline overview of 205, of the light heavyweight division, before John Jones. He says he only started watching in 2018. He was always curious what the weight class was like. Was Tito any good? Was Couture any good? Was Chuck Liddell any good? It feels to him that limited training and skill level is the reason why these personalities were so interesting, because they were all capable of hilariously knocking each other out at any moment. So as if this episode wasn't Two Old Men Yell at Cloud enough, we're now going to reminisce about the good old days. Back before we even knew to hate light heavyweight, we thought it was pretty cool, didn't we?
Premier division, they called it.
It was, And that's the thing. I mean, Chuck Liddell was obviously like one of the first stars for the UFC, but around the Chuck Liddell time, a lot of the really big shit in MMA was actually happening in Pride as well. Rampage Jackson was over there for a time. Shogun Hua was there before then coming to the UFC and continued to fight for a very long time after that. Vanderlei Silva, of course. Dan Henderson, of course. A lot of people who would go on to be players for like the rest of that pre-John Jones era. And some of them even well into the John Jones era, were actually having their fights in Pride. Man, that's looking back at Pride, Phil. Heavyweight and light heavyweight both seemed like such cool divisions. What the fuck happened? They are just clearly the worst divisions in the sport now.
I mean, they were the divisions where people could make money.
Yeah.
And there were lots of steroids.
Yes.
And
yes.
The
general
skill level of all. I mean, but still, like, realistically, like the lightweights were like much better.
Oh,
than
no
the
question.
Heavyweights and
No
heavyweights of this era. But yeah, the the lightweights simply continued fighting and evolving because they had to get better because they were fighting other good lightweights, and the level of skill at lightweight simply went up and up and up and up, and the level of skill at heavyweight went up, and light heavyweight went up a bit.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the core questions we got to ask today, right? Has the, how much did the level of skill go up? And I don't want to be too facetious because it did obviously go up like quite a lot. If you put Tito Ortiz in his prime into the modern UFC, he would probably get some wins.
I mean, we were just talking about how depressing the ESPN era was, and almost not even there enough to be depressing a lot of the time. One of the essential ironies of it is that, undeniably, in addition to all this meaningless slop, we have also seen several instances of the best, most skilled MMA ever.
Yeah.
So there's no question, skill across the board. Quality of individual fighters, like the best of the best are better by far than the best of yesteryear. And that is true at light heavyweight and heavyweight as well.
Yeah, 100%. So how do we want to do this? Do we want to sort of go back to the beginning? And, if we want, say, a beginning, it would be, I don't know if we want to go all the way back to like Tito Ortiz, Elvis Sinosic. It would probably just be Tito in general, right?
Yeah.
Or do we want to kind of take a philosophical view on, what does good mean in this particular case? Because
go on.
I think in general, whenever you're doing historical comparisons, you're very rarely going to be looking at a fully linear better versus worse comparison.
Yeah.
You will always be able to find older fighters who are doing stuff which is neat, even by modern standards. They're going to have a unique or well-developed skill set, or strategic mind, or, athleticism, or whatever, some kind of element of their game is going to be standout, even by modern standards. The question is simply that they might be good or revolutionary at that particular skill set, but many other elements of their game will not be there.
Yeah.
And also, it's, another thing that we've talked about, which we talked about with relation to John Jones, is that fighters are only as good as they need to be.
Yeah.
John Jones is, not the world's greatest striker, in fact. John Jones, as it turned out, now that he is essentially, to all intents and purposes, retired, even though he desperately wants to come back for that White House card, he never needed to be a good striker. And so many fighters had relatively limited games, in part because, they didn't need to be any less limited than this.
Right. He was good enough for what his frame allowed him to do, that the rest of the division, who were simply good enough to beat each other, could not deal with. So I don't know if we have to go back all the way to the beginning. I mean, a lot of, on the UFC side in particular, like the Machida era happened. Pre-John Jones. The Machida era, which is even more ironically called an era than the ESPN era, because it lasted for exactly one fight. But that was actually right around the time that I really got into MMA, which is why Machida was one of my first favorite fighters, and why I will not brook anyone saying that he's boring.
Even though you know that he is.
Yes. Frequently. Not always. Sometimes he's just fucking awesome. So I mean, like, if you go back to like Chuck Liddell, like, Chuck kind of sucks by modern technical standards. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
He's like a complete fucking mess. He was simply super durable and really fast And he would just do everything to leverage both of these traits. And he was just very mentally tough too. So like, there was just no question whatsoever in Chuck Liddell's mind when he was fighting that if he could keep the fight going, that he would find a chance to knock his opponent out. That was the Chuck Liddell thing. That's all he needed.
Yep.
Like, who was Chuck Liddell fighting other than the big bouts with like Jardine and Ortiz? I mean, Jardine was not even regarded as a big bout at first. He was fighting, Vernon White, Jeremy Horn. Like, these are guys who, in modern MMA, Renato Sobral, in modern MMA, guys of that skill level would be like a dude with like a 17-10 record, who's like I can't believe I'm forgetting his name at the moment. Davy Grant.
Yeah.
Davy Grant, who we love. We're like, there's something really clever and like savvy about the way Davy Grant fights, but you watch him and you're like, it's only because he's so smart that he's making this game work as well as it does.
Yep.
And you can see that in his record. He just doesn't beat the really good guys. So this was, an era when like Chuck Liddell as champion was essentially defending against a string of like Neil Magny's.
Yeah.
Skill for skill.
He was really a proto. So, I mean, Tito was was one of the earlier fighters to like really combine together effective grappling and wrestling, which was one of the people tended to be good at one or the other.
Right.
And Chuck was really one of the first. Like one of the first really effective sprawl and brawl fighters.
Yeah.
He had a good sprawl. He hit super hard. And that's pretty much it.
That's the thing that stands out about all those names, right? It's like everybody he's fighting is a wrestler. Mm-hmm. That was what was required. Like, you had to be a guy who could, if you wanted to be a striker, you had to be able to basically finish people, because a lot of time, if you weren't finishing them, was going to be sucked off the clock by dealing with wrestling attacks. And you had to be able to throw strikes while compensating for the threat of a takedown. Yep. Which even today is something we see much more skilled MMA fighters really struggling to do.
Yep.
So it just didn't really matter that Chuck Liddell's game was shit. Of course, you can look at that and see like an early iteration of a pattern that we still see today, which is the striker who handles wrestlers getting absolutely embarrassed by another striker. Mm-hmm. And you can see that in his fights with like Keith Jardine. Weird and janky as he was, went in there, and because all he wanted to do was to like land low kicks and left hooks and move around at range, Chuck just couldn't handle him. His style just didn't function.
And this was also, I think, the era where the more generalist style of Japanese MMA, at least in and Japan-focused MMA, at least in these weight classes, was pretty much undeniably turning out better fighters.
Mm-hmm.
So meanwhile, whilst you had the sort of Tito, Chuck, and Randy thing, Randy broadly someone who's didn't have quite the offensive wrestling of Tito, and definitely couldn't strike like Chuck, but who was merely a strategically smart fighter. Again, people generally had like one really good thing going for them, but between these guys, these were all relatively limited. Like. Randy just wasn't. Randy and Tito were really pretty terrible strikers, and Chuck was simply a bad striker but had tons of power. But the difference between this and the fighters over in Pride, who were like Wanderlei Silva, Rampage Jackson, Shogun Rua, Ricardo Arona, and so on, is that these guys were just more complete.
Yeah.
In terms of they could grapple, they could wrestle a bit. Shogun obviously had notoriously horrific takedown defense, but he could scramble. He was very athletic.
The deep half guard.
The deep half, and of course his knee bar.
His famous knee bar series. Yeah.
Sorry, this was for anyone who was on the forums at this particular, not just this particular time, but for 15 years. People where Shogun would get matched up with people, and then someone would be like, "Well, I don't know, he's going to be able to wrestle this guy," and someone would with the confidence of like a cultist predicting the apocalypse, just tell you, don't worry, he's got this deep half sweep in his knee bar.
Let me just ask you, Phil,
this.
Because I'm wondering if it'll be the same effect that I just experienced, the ESPN era having destroyed our sense of the passage of time. Mm-hmm. When do you think Shogun Hua's final MMA fight was? What year?
I'm going to say like something disgusting, like 2022.
It was 2023. He got knocked out in one round by Ihor Potieria in 2023. But because of this unbelievable length of his career, there are shockingly recent instances of Joe Rogan talking about Shogun Hua's leg lock game and his deep half sweep series. You could get that really like in the ESPN era. You can hear Joe Rogan talking about that. It's pretty great.
Oh my God.
It's pretty great.
But yeah, so broadly, and whilst the Pride guys were, I think, more complete at this point, generally just like a higher level tier of athleticism in general, and could do more. And I think this was very noticeable when Dana, in one of his earlier big man humiliations, thought he would do the thing where he sent Chuck Liddell over to fight in Pride briefly, and he got absolutely thrashed by Rampage, who was, again, a good wrestler who could actually box a bit.
Yep.
And thus horrific kryptonite to Chuck.
Yeah. He did, however, smoke a very scrawny Alistair Overeem in that same tournament. So it wasn't all losses, but yes, Dana absolutely buried Chuck for embarrassing him in front of the cool Japanese kids.
Yep. The Yakuza are laughing at me, Mom.
So yeah.
So these two eras sort of combined once the UFC bought up Pride, and meanwhile a new era of a new era of UFC fighters was rising up.
Yeah, some
which were basically
generalists like Forrest Griffin. He's like the American answer to those Brazilian and Japanese generalists. A guy who is actually he's not as good at any one thing as they are at their like real A games, but he really will do all the things to win.
Yep.
But then also Shogun running into the likes of Machida, who is, of course, one of MMA's great all-time specialists with a supremely specialized skill set. He still probably would have fit in fine in the Pride era because he had takedowns and, the jiu-jitsu game as well. But his game was really designed to funnel people into the one thing he wanted to do.
Yep. Yeah, and I think this sort of particular era is, it's defined by the loss of the question being like, can you wrestle or not?
Yeah.
That is definitely not what we're looking at. This, I mean, basically, Quinton comes over and KOs Chuck to take the belt, and then he loses it to Forrest Griffin, who is basically just consistent point-scoring range kickboxing.
Mm-hmm.
Then Forrest Griffin loses it to Rashad Evans, who is simply extremely explosive.
Yep.
And then Rashad tries to fight a extremely slow-paced one-punch fight against Lyoto Machida, which is stupid, and gets finished and generates one of the most popular memes of the era, the Shad face.
Yes.
And then Machida has his 2 fights with Shogun.
Mm-hmm.
The first, a highly controversial decision where Shogun hasn't really been looking that good up until this fight, and then suddenly, in a vaguely sort of Piotr Jan Mirab way, suddenly reinvigorates himself for the actual belt, and then looks incredible and basically cripples Lyoto. And then the rematch where Shogun is already on the downslope and Machida doesn't realize it and tries to take him down and gets knocked out.
Yep. Yeah. That is absolutely what happened, by the way. Is like Machida somehow like overestimated Shogun in such a way that he got knocked out by Shogun.
Yep.
Which is a thing, by the way, that would continue happening in Shogun Rua's career almost until the end of it.
Yeah.
There would still be fights where somebody would have so much respect for him that they basically ensured that he would knock them out.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. And of course, around the same time, and I mean, we're already really in the era, I think, where Jones is about to make his ascent.
Yeah, because Shogun never defended.
Right.
That was it.
He, so around the same time that Jones is like appearing or about to appear, we've got guys like Ryan Bader and Phil Davis kicking around in the division. These are like big, strong, athletic wrestle boxers. That was kind of becoming the defining thing of the division, I feel. Like if John Jones never existed, maybe that's just the direction it would have gone in. As like a whole trend, because there's like kind of a clear series of phases from like Chuck to all the Pride guys coming over, to like the next iteration of the guys that Chuck was feasting on in his heyday. But then John Jones appeared and just completely broke the whole division.
Yep.
With his weird game and his really weird frame and his even weirder brain.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think the early parts of light heavyweight, are super flawed, particularly on the side of the UFC. If you basically look back at Pride era Pride era, what they referred to as middleweights, like Shogun, etc. You will, and someone told you that these guys were like a prospect that was coming to the UFC, you'd be like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing what this guy can do. These are extremely functional generalist games that simply would need a lot of fine tuning to function in the modern UFC. And yeah, since then, it was basically people rounding out into what people considered to be like, functional approaches. Ways of winning via scoring points became, much more significant. Mm-hmm. Forrest Griffin or Lyoto Machida, both in their own ways. Like Forrest Griffin just through the volume, through just throwing a lot, and Machida through not throwing at all and trying to simply control what is happening throughout the fight. Were both kind of people that were building out functional ways of having a points lead throughout a fight and had the robust games necessary to support this.
Yeah.
But in general, the most, apart from all of the kind of stylistic evolutions, and it's worth noting that, like, even though you mentioned the wrestlers, there's never been an era since that.
No.
Since that early Tito thing, apart from the brief reign of Daniel Cormier and I guess Glover Teixeira, when like wrestlers have been running the light heavyweight division. But I think the main thing that one of the really significant things which differentiates like light heavyweight in a lot of ways back then from now is simply size and athleticism.
Yes. Which is why Jones is a very useful...
People had one or the other, basically, back then. They did not ever have both.
Yeah.
You could be athletic like Shogun, but Shogun is not a big modern light heavyweight.
No.
And also Shogun had an extremely short physical prime. You could be big. I mean, Tito is actually still a reasonably sized light heavyweight, even by modern standards.
His head certainly is.
Yeah, for sure. Guy's like 1/3 head. But I mean, even he's not actually a big modern light heavyweight.
No.
But he's vastly less athletic
than someone
like fucking Johnny Walker.
Right. Yeah. The average like top 10 light heavyweight now is like 6'3".
Yep.
Which is why it's very clear that, like, I think John Jones is a very useful kind of landmark moment in this division. And as much as we all made fun of it at the time, like Alexander Gustafsson being marketed as the guy who's going to handle Jones because he's also big. Remember? Greatness within reach. It was kind of true. Like, it actually is very helpful to be very big against somebody built like John Jones.
Yep.
So now we just have a bunch of giant freaks. We've got fucking, I don't know why Alonzo Menefield is the first name that came to mind, but we've got Prochazka, Johnny Walker, Jamal Hill's like a big, weird, lanky guy. Poatan, of course, the biggest man who's ever lived.
Yep.
It's just like that is the defining trait is you have to be really big and you have to be a top shelf athlete for that size.
Yep.
Remember Sokaju?
Yeah.
He was a great athlete. How big was he?
Yeah, he would 100% be a modern 185er.
Must be, right? I have to figure out what his actual height is. Sokaju is 5'10".
Jesus.
He seems so
big. Yeah, he wouldn't even be a middleweight.
Yeah. Yeah, featherweight Sokaju. He seemed so big at the time, didn't he?
Yep.
So yeah. That's I suppose a brief recap of what light heavyweight was like before John Jones.
Yeah, as I said, like there's so many. You will still see so many cool things if you go back and look at these guys.
Oh yeah,
particularly I think the early UFC. I don't think there's much to be gained, to be honest, from looking at like Chuck and Tito.
No,
they're just not that good. I think Randy's always really cool to look at because you're looking at like the mind of a modern fighter with the technique of someone in that era. That's a he's always genuinely interesting to look at.
Yeah, and he also had interesting phases like when he upped his boxing game and knocked down Tim Sylvia and stuff too. Like, Randy Couture is definitely worth a look. Yep.
But yeah, if you look back at like Wanderlei, Shogun, Lyoto, even, at times, Rashad, Quinton Rampage Jackson's fight against Dan Henderson, Dan Henderson in general, like all of these guys, they might not always be, executing what we would consider to be like functional modern games, but they'll every now and again you'll just see something brilliant come out of them, and maybe something that no one does nowadays.
Yeah.
You know, looking at Wanderlei's clinch, or maybe it's stuff that people can't do nowadays, like Shogun stomps.
Right.
Rashad, sometimes, he'll be doing tons of absolute nothing. Then sometimes he will hit the best level change mix-ups you've ever seen.
Yep.
Just absolutely stunning stuff.
Yep.
So yeah, that's generally what you get from looking back at older fighters. Like I said, it's never a straightforward like, they were just worse back then kind of thing. There's always something cool that they're doing.
Yeah.
Or at least most of the time.
And you always have to look at it through the lens of people are as good as they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And don't just look at it and say, this is simply worse for no good reason than what I have now. Like, the reason what you have now is better is because of these guys, in large part, and they were better than the guys that came before them because they had to be to hang in the division of the time.
Yep.
And MMA is still so much a sport of, like, you don't know what you don't know. It's so weird that it draws from some of the most ancient sports of all humanity. And yet, right now I'm looking at scads of fighters who don't know how to move their feet. So, like, someday we'll be looking back on this era and being like, man, can you believe they didn't know how to pivot then? Fucking everybody does that now. Why wouldn't you? It all seems obvious in hindsight. Some of it seems obvious at the moment, but there are reasons.
Or we'll be looking back on this era and somehow we'll still be...
Yeah.
We'll be having, like, fighters who are absolutely incredible technicians with unbelievable footwork at the top of the division, and then we'll still have people that don't know how to pivot at the bottom.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of already what we have.
Well, exactly, yeah. Like,
some guys who have really figured it all out.
The cheap fighters are still going to be terrible.
Yeah. Go figure. So, I think that is our rundown of the light heavyweight division pre-John Jones. And I think we're going to have time for a lot more discussions like this. So I will ask you once again, for the coming weeks, let us know what you want to hear us talk about, and we will see what piques our interest. But we appreciate that question. Was it Matthew, I think? Yes, Matthew Melange. Thank you for that prompt. I hope you found that to your satisfaction. And we'll be back next week for... I don't know yet. Been a while since I've said that. What was that, Phil?
It's a mystery.
It's a mystery. A tantalizing mystery. But we hope you will join us there to discover the mystery with us. Find us on social media at Boxing Bush, at Evil Greg Jackson. Those are our handles on Twitter. I think you can find me on Blue Sky at King Typo. And, of course, the YouTube comments underneath this episode are another great way to give us your suggestions. We'll talk to you next week. Until then, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.